Okay, we are live with the first Prometheus Operator office hours after the holidays. Um, First item of the agenda is Prometheus agent deployment strategies.
Yeah, this is something I added. I'm not sure how many of you have seen the document about the Prometheus agent support in the Prometheus operator. As we discussed, we want to explore this option of having a dedicated CRD, which still subject for discussion, but assuming we take that approach. We have a couple of options of how to actually deploy the agent on Kubernetes. So whether we would use a Kubernetes deployment or Kubernetes stateful set, where I think the primary concerns were about that. And I just wanted to maybe have this discussion in person and see if we can resolve it either today or at least make some steps forward. So I know that Pavel had a lot of, he had concerns with using a stateful set. Unfortunately, he's not here, so we won't be able to hear it in person. But yeah, maybe everyone else can chime in and provide their feedback and their opinions on the whole topic.
Yeah. Yeah, my main idea is that probably sticking with this stateful set is at least something that we want to do for now, given all the experience we have accumulated with the regular Prometheus custom resource. We know how they work. We know the limitations in general. I think it's good indeed, like as commented in the proposal, to at least enumerate the different options, even if we decide that this option doesn't work for this and these reasons, because then we have recorded that somewhere at least. And yeah, my gut feeling is that stateful set is probably needed. Daemon set might also have a use case, but yeah, obviously, ideally, we want people to chime in, and people that plan on using or are already using the Prometheus agent pod to give us feedback on what they'd like to see.
Is there any downside of using stateful sets?
The problem with the stateful set is when you have a single pod, basically a single replica, the way that the stateful set rollout works is that pod first gets terminated and then a new pod starts. So in that time, you can have a small delay in scraping. So you're not essentially losing data, but you're delaying the next scrape. So, for example, if you can't schedule the new pod for some reason in a cluster, you might you might be missing data for a couple of seconds or maybe even a couple of minutes. Imagine that your cluster needs to scale out. It needs to add new nodes, which can take a couple of minutes sometimes. During that time, in that particular situation, you might be in the blind to what's happening with the cluster. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess this is also the problem with running Prometheus. It's just that when we run Prometheus, we usually use a pair for agents. Yeah, I'm not sure if there's even a good if there are good practices on whether to run a pair of agents, to run a single agent. I think everyone is currently exploring and trying to find those best practices. But for this specific situation, one instance of the agent, we're going to be prone to those problems. The other concern, so on the flip side, with the deployment, the problem is that there's an edge case where, let's say that the remote write target is unavailable for some reason. The agent is going to store the scraped samples locally on a local file system. And if during that time there's a rollout, so you replace the deployment pods, you're going to lose the samples that you have scraped. So that's the downside of the deployment. So it feels like there's no perfect solution, and you just simply have to pick the trade-off that you think you're most comfortable with.
Yeah. Again, hearing the different arguments, I think there will be probably people that are okay with a deployment-based model because they don't want to deal with persistent storage. They basically want to get the metrics out of the cluster, but if they lose a few data, then that's not a big deal for them, maybe. And there are probably other people that would like to be certain that the agent acts really as a buffer and doesn't lose anything, or at least the very minimum. Something else that might be worth discussing, I'm not sure if it's already in the document or not, is potentially sharding the agents. I can see a model where you run at a cloud provider with different availability zones, and maybe you want one agent per zone because that's your failure domain. So if a zone crashes, then there is you want your agent to be co-located with the zone so that you are not impacted with with a single zone being down.
Yeah, I have a feeling this would be solvable with affinity rules, or actually anti-affinity rules. But yes, then you will have to also shard the service monitors. You have to shard the targets. I see.
Yes. Yeah, you would have to shard the targets. Yeah. Right now, the sharding we have is really take the address of the target, then distribute it across all the replicas, all the shards. While here, probably what you'd like is to say all the targets within I will only scrape metrics from the targets within my availability zone, if that's possible. I'm not even sure it's possible.
Do you think this sharding would delay more? I'm not sure. I probably won't be able to help with implementation, but I usually vote for getting something ready as soon as possible.
Oh yeah. Yeah. My point is not to say that we need to have all the details nailed out before we start implementation, but at least if we can have
that in mind.
And high level understanding of where we want to go.
So keeping that in mind, I mean, one potential way forward is to maybe start with a stateful set, mark everything as alpha, the CRD as alpha, and I don't know if we can make a disclaimer that this might actually change, and there might be breaking changes in the future. And then start with a stateful set. because we will also likely be able to reuse some of the code that we have for the Prometheus instances. So we already make a stateful set. And we might be able to just hook in right into the code base and just fairly quickly come up with something that's usable.
Yeah, that makes sense for me. And also, I mean, like not only for us, we, like I said at the beginning, we understand the use cases for stateful sets and the limitations, but the same is probably true for the users. I mean, people that have experience with the Prometheus operator, they know all the tricks and all the things that may happen. While if we switch to something completely different, then we need to learn again everything. So yeah, I think it makes sense to start to experiment with something which is close to what we have. Like you said, mark it clearly as alpha, not making any promise, like maybe even the stateful set model will not be supported in the future, but that gives us a starting point. Yeah.
Sorry, I just need to step aside for a couple of seconds.
I'm writing down what Simon just said.
Yeah. Thank you, Arthur. Yeah, and I think we can iterate from there. There was also a discussion on one of the issues or one pull request about why we want a different custom resource definition, but the agreement across maintainers was like they are significantly different. The model under which we deploy, that we want something that clearly separates the agent from the regular Prometheus server mode, especially if you want to experiment. Otherwise, that's going to be like a big issue. If we start to pull, yeah.
Even the conversation we just had around whether it should be a deployment or a stateful set kind of points to the fact that it should be different. There's different opinions. I think that same user waited in on the doc and they're kind of engaging in the doc, if I'm not mistaken anyway. And seem to be happy with the CRD. Yes, as Philip said already, I think it was Pavel that seemed to be more focused on the issue with the stateful set. I personally don't have any objections to it, but unfortunately he's not here to state his opinion. But maybe it would be good to sync up with him after, just to if that is the route we're going down.
Yeah, you can also watch the recording and make his own recording, and then we can talk in recordings. Yeah, and also, so for the question about using a dedicated CRD or not, I think so. One difference with using a dedicated CRD is that there won't be an update path between using Prometheus in agent mode and using Prometheus in server mode. So that can be an issue, or it can be a feature, depending on how we decide, depending on the interpretation. I'm not sure if there are actually cases where one would want to convert a server to an agent and vice versa. From what I understand, even the walls, they are kind of byte for byte compatible, but even in upstream Prometheus, there isn't a clear decision whether a server should be able to start with an agent wall and vice versa. Does someone who's more involved with the kind of the upstream have an opinion there?
My feeling is that if you want to switch from the Prometheus server mode to the Prometheus agent mode, it's not going to be like a switch. Like you are not going to switch everything from T0 to the new mode. Probably want to run things in parallel for a bit of time, just to make sure that everything works fine. Given that, so that's assumed, but maybe it's worth restating it, is that the new Prometheus agent custom resource would work with service monitors, with pod monitors, with probes. So that means that you can simply run both in parallel, provided that you have the same selectors, then they should scrape the same things, and you should be fine. If you want to reduce the period of time when you run things in parallel, then you can just deploy the new stuff, delete the old one, and you're done. Doesn't seem like a big issue for me, but
yeah. I agree. This is definitely a good solution. I think one of the concerns that we had in the document was exactly that with the using the same CRD, one would just set the flag and could roll out the update across clusters, but that's maybe not even something that you want to do, given that whatever we implement is going to be in an alpha version, and it's going to be a good idea to run things in parallel for a while at least, until things have converged and stabilized. So yeah, running things in parallel would be a good solution there.
One question about this duplicated data. I think, like, since the agent, this is not a question about agent, right? It's about Prometheus server.
Are you referring to the second agenda
Yes.
item?
Okay, sorry. I guess I jumped. Sorry.
But I guess we can also move on to the second agenda item, unless someone has something else to say or to add to the previous discussion. Maybe JP or Philip. Okay.
I had something. Actually, I think we are having a lot of issues happening due to the field-related validation issues. So I think for that we already have logged one issue for validating webhook for service monitor, probe, and pod monitor. But I had one question regarding that. Basically, if you use open API schema validation for setting default values and all, how we can compare that values set by open API schema with what user entered? So I was not able to figure this out, like how we can test that. So unless we set the value, because whatever set by open API schema is set during runtime, right? Like how we will compare what user entered and what is the default value that will be used by that open API schema. I'm not sure if I am clear, but
yeah, I think I got your question. From what I understand, you can't make a distinction between the two. It's just that the model will enforce that, say that the user didn't pass any specific value for the field, then automatically in the operator, we would see that as we would see the field with the default value anyway. So, and there will be no way for the operator to know that the field was empty and defaulted to the default value, or it was set explicitly to the default value. I'm not sure if it's an issue for you or not.
no, actually, we had this discussion while in this PR for scrape timeout validation to compare whatever value that has been set in default and what user has entered. So we had a suggestion, okay, we can set the default value using that validation marker. But I had that question: how will I compare what user has set and the default value we are specifying in the cube, that marker? So it basically came from there, like how we can test this.
Like I said, you can't really test it or even know that something has been defined or not. We'll just, the operator itself doesn't know, so to say, that there is a default value in the API. It will just consider that the user has provided value X for the field. So yeah, instead of making the default into the operator code, then we delegate to the API just to do it.
Okay.
All right. So then the second agenda topic. So the which something that I think we haven't even explored in the document yet. And if it's too long-winded discussion, we can also just park it for next time. But I would just wanted to bring up the kind of the problem of when you run the agent in an HA mode. That can mean multiple things, but in the simpler case, you would scrape the same targets, let's say twice. And the agent would remote write the same samples twice. So that would move the responsibility of deduplicating the data, or however the user wants to treat the data, to the remote write target. And whether you do that in some sort of a middleware layer when you receive the data or during query time, you'll have to take into account the fact that you have duplicated samples and you need to deduplicate them somehow. So I was wondering whether this is something that we want to tackle in the operator as well. And one way to do it is by implementing HA mode with leader election, so that you always have only one agent instance that's sending the data, and then you have a passive instance that takes over if the initial one fails. Or we just want to say, if you want to have HA mode, you're going to have the samples duplicated, and it's up to you how you want to handle the deduplication.
I believe most of the long-term storages have downsampling already. Like Tunnels, Victoria-Metrics, I think Cortex as well. So personally, I wouldn't really care about too much.
And do you know how they so this downsampling? Do you know how it works? Is it something that happens in the background, or is it synchronous?
Yeah, I don't really know how implementation details. I just know that I think Tunnels works like they expect Prometheus to have a certain external label, and they receive samples. They see that the samples have this external labels configured, and they just delete one of them. Not sure though. I see that it's just what you were describing.
Okay, so maybe in that case, it's just worth investigating what the remote write systems already have in place, and then if it's already in place, then we don't have to worry about it. All right. Okay. That's that for the second
sorry.
topic.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Like maybe we can think about it in the future. But yeah, let's assume that for now, if you want to achieve like HA for the scraping of the metrics, then you might end up sending duplicate samples. And if you are not okay with that, yeah, sure, we can think about something different. But like for the other question, there are always trade-offs. Like if you are okay to lose your data for some time because you can't schedule your agent nowhere, then that's up to you. Yeah.
Okay.
And because also, yeah, I think like my primary feeling would be that even with leader election, then you are not immune to losing, like not scraping anything because there is a split, because whatever happens.
Yeah, there's going to be a delay when the failure happens, definitely.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Then the next one is there's a PR from Philip introducing Kubescape, which is a tool that scans YAML manifests and just see if we are following the best practice, the best security practice. There's not really much of a discussion. I see that Pavel already approved the PR. It's just me asking Philip if you want help. I would love to contribute to this effort as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean that there's a comment on the end. Basically, there was a suggestion that we'll just merge as is and use our existing threshold as a point of failure or a few points above it, at least. But I was going to take the output of those of that scan and basically create some issues from it that we can move forward with to try and Pavel has a comment there as well. But obviously we can't tackle everything because of the host port issues and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we're at like 33.8% or something. So
I remember. I remember from previous discussion with Pavel that we were at some point with 68%.
Yeah, I think the tool may have changed. Like so now it was like risk assessment or whatever is the percentage now, and before it was like whatever it was called. It was the positive side of things. So I think it's just like a reversal of percentages. If that makes sense.
Somehow. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. I think so. We're on the first release of that Kubescape tool, and I think they've just altered the output basically. So it's gone from I don't know like 62 or 3 to 38, and now we're looking at risk factor where before it was like success rate. If that makes sense. So no, we haven't gone down much, if anything. It's just they tweaked the tool, and like they've only have the one release. So when he ran it, he was probably running it from main or whatever a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
But I think it does spit out some output, and I was going to just create those issues, break it down, and see where we can improve basically. So,
yeah, cool.
I'll work on that once we merge this.
I'll catch up on GitHub.
Good.
Next one it's also added by me. I remember some weeks ago that we were discussing that we wanted self-hosted GitHub action runners, and we were looking for a sponsorship from Equinix. Just asking if we still need that, and I can contact them. Like I look at their sponsorship page, and I almost sure that we qualify. So we just need to reach out. Do we still need it?
I looked into the whole self-hosted thing. It gets a bit complicated for public repositories. The way that currently GitLab Actions run is for each PR, there is a new VM that's getting spun up. Actually, for each workflow or for each job in the workflow, there's a new VM that's being spun up. So even if you have malicious code, malicious contributions, they're isolated to that one VM. With self-hosted runners, I believe that they're getting recycled. So potentially, it gets a bit less secure to use self-hosted runners for public projects, and this is also something that GitHub has documented in the runners documentation. So the level of kind of effort to maintain those runners would go up a bit. So that's the only concern I have with using self-hosted runners.
I mean, maybe Kinix will reach out to us saying, "Hey, you're running malicious software," or allowing people to run.
Maybe even not Equinix. I mean, the thing is that we will not have this mechanism of recycling virtual machines. So we would probably get static VMs that execute tests, and they would we'll have to make sure that there's proper cleanup and that there isn't leftover code, and a contribution does not. Let's say someone makes a PR that installs a Bitcoin miner on the machine. Because they would get access to the machine, to a long running machine through a pull request. So that's the potential attack vector.
Yeah, that from my 2000 feed view. Yeah, the main risk, like Philip said, is probably that we end up maintaining something, taking care of all the security holes, and thinking carefully about it, while I'm afraid that, at least not myself, I don't have enough bandwidth to dedicate to that. So again, if Arthur, if you've got a use case where you see, oh, that would be nice to have, because we could run, I don't know, we could validate against, maybe I would see that more for like periodic jobs, like things that people can't really, external contributors can't really use, but something that we run regularly, like making sure that Kube-prometheus, you can deploy it on Kube 120, 21, 22, 23, and you don't break anything. But that I would be comfortable with that, definitely.
So basically, you're saying something that we run as ourselves, or jobs that we define. Yeah, that would make sense.
But I don't think we do have anything like this. Besides, like we have a job that updates Kubernetes dependencies, but it's so lightweight. I don't think.
Yeah. I was just thinking about something more. Like I could see even for the Prometheus Operator, for instance, we always test one version of Kubernetes, like the latest we can get in the CI, and we don't really, like, if we break something for Kube 121, we just rely on the users to tell us that, hey, you've done something which is breaking the support of the operator on that particular version of Kubernetes, which is still quite widely used. It would be the one use case I would find for having our own CI infrastructure.
So just like maybe run the end-to-end tests against several versions, or weekly or nightly or whatever.
Yeah. Whatever we can run that's not going to be triggered by a pull request, I think is fairly safe.
I know Pavel had some thoughts in Kube-prometheus, I think you too, Arthur, as well, about generating manifests for different platforms and publishing them. I don't have the exact details, but just some other use case that came to mind there.
Because I think that the runners are actually the quota is allocated to the organization. So Prometheus Operator and Kube-prometheus, they're sharing the same pool of runners.
We don't have, well, I personally don't see too much issue either with the current workflows. Like, I know you might have slight delays here and there, but overall with the amount of like external contributors we get, and that it's not really a massive problem at the moment anyway, is it?
Yeah, I totally agree. I just brought it up because I remember we spent some time discussing that and then forget about it. Okay, I guess we are out of topics. Anything else?
While we're on the topic of CI, I do see that one of those jobs, like the check documentation thing, is failing really regularly. Again, I think it's some web archive for CoreOS operators homepage or something. Seems to be failing a lot in the test. So I might investigate if we can actually why we're using that and where, and remove it if possible. I don't know if anyone knows anything about that, but it seems to be something that may be added quite some time ago. I'd have to look into exactly what's failing, but it's just some blog post or something that we seem to link.
This doc you're saying that it's failing is on Kube-prometheus or from operator?
In the operator.
Okay.
Is it mdocs checking external links?
I think that's it, exactly, yeah. Let me just see if I can find an example.
I mean, what we can do is we can split that job so that the external link check is done in a dedicated job that can fail, and everything else is a mandatory job that must succeed.
Yeah, I think it already is non-required, but it's just like, you know, you go to review the PR or something gets merged and you just have your like red X beside it. For me anyway, it's just, I would rather see it go green on like if there's a check in there that's regularly failing. We don't really need. I think we do need the check itself, but it's just this particular link seems to be timing out. And I hit it actually in the browser myself, and it's like taking 30 seconds to load or whatever. So I think the job overall is pretty stable. It's just that one or two broken links or flaky links.
I mean, we can also remove link checking. I don't know whether there's a good benefit.
One that comes to mind is the markdown that gets generated. You can link off to the Kubernetes types and stuff. Probably good to have that working. But
what about checking only links that we control, like internal documentation links? We have to look into mdocs and see how much we can tweak the configuration. Maybe we can only check links pointing to GitHub, for example, or something like that, and ignore everything else. Or yeah, so basically to GitHub and to Kubernetes IO, those links we definitely want checked. Everything else maybe can be ignored.
I haven't been in the mdocs code in a while, but there is two YAML config files you can provide, and they were fairly thorough from what I remember. So look, I'll take that on and take a look at that one.
Yeah, you can probably ping Saswata on that because he's the one that added the mdocs checks. So, but I would agree in general that yeah, we can turn into a check explicitly these domains and don't care about like the random links, like the links from the adopters, stuff like that. Okay, if one site is down, that's not really a big issue because, or maybe we can, yeah, I don't know. You can exclude some files to be checked. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think your first analysis there, like, you know, what's actually critical we want to know is broken versus we don't really care. And maybe if we don't really care, we can just remove that from the doc anyway. But I'll go through them and see what exactly is regularly failing. One final thing, if no one else has anything else, I do have the first draft of the splitting up the decoupling the webhook code into HA deployment. So I know Simon's had some comments on that, but if anyone else wants to take a look, it'd be good to get some eyes on that. There's just some conversation about dropping metrics and maybe adding some to the new admission webhook. But overall, it's in pretty good shape, I think, ready for review.
I'm gonna post the document somewhere. I don't really know where it is.
Yeah, I'll drop in that link.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess that's it then. See you all in 2
Yep.
weeks.
Yep. Bye.
Thanks,
See ya.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.